Howdy, and welcome to the channel. And have you ever had one of those instances where you're having to fix trailer wires or a wire on your mower and you end up having melted connectors or cold solder joints, or worse yet, you just kind of bundle it up in a bunch of electrical tape? Well, today we're going to be putting to test this new Haisstronica heat gun and their heat solder connectors. And there's definitely some stuff in this video that's going to surprise me. Now, Haisstronica did send me this kit for me to test with. They're not paying me to do this, so my reviews are my own. However I come out at the end of it, that's how I feel about it, and they're okay with that, and that's who we are as a channel. I do have an affiliate link below, but as always, feel free to go to Amazon and just pick it up from there if that works best for you. So let's see what is included in it. We have our instructions here and just a nice little handheld heat gun. There is a rocker switch on it, and that's going to be your two different settings that you have. And on those settings, one of them is going to be 250 degrees, which is like 482 degrees Fahrenheit, or the other one is going to be 400 degrees Celsius, or roughly 750-ish degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the other nice thing that I do like about this is it does have an insertable tip, and the outer sheath here just pushes right around the outer metal on it. But what this is going to specifically allow you to do is to hook this around your solder joint, and it's going to send that heat around the entire thing. So this means you don't have to move it as much going around the wire, and it will do a much better job of evenly distributing the heat. It concentrates it in that area. You can use them like this. It's just a lot more difficult. Little itty bitty things like this make it very much more usable. And it does have a nifty little stand on it. If you need to leave it on for some reason, you can actually have it on. You can do your connectors. If you're doing a whole bunch in a row, then it's gonna make your work surface a lot safer having a stand built into it like this. So one of the things with this heat gun that they claim in the information is you can actually use it to take off paint, which is very true. You can definitely use heat guns. It's one of the ways I prefer to remove paint off of cabinets and things like that. But you can also use it to heat up, for example, PVC piping, to create bends in it. They even talk about using it for vinyl wrap. So one of the tests we're going to be doing with this is we're gonna plug it in and we're gonna see if it will run for a duration of time without actually overheating and shutting itself off. Now with this, I was sent the 440 piece kit, and this is actually a pretty nice kit overall, just like the last one was. We have a little brochure in here that talks about the different type of connectors, how long to cut them, etc. But you can see we have different size connectors. We've got really small ones, we've got really big ones, we even have extremely dinky ones. And then of course we're gonna have standard heat shrink that is included with the kit. Since these are heat shrink tubing, they're actually going to heat shrink as well as put the solder onto the wire. I'm not really sure that the heat shrink in the kit is necessary. However, I will say that it's nice to have these because every now and then you'll end up having a nick in your wire or something doesn't fit right, and having these available is actually pretty nice with the kit. The other thing that is really nice, if you've ever picked up heat shrink from Harbor Freight and even the stuff from Lowe's and Home Depot, that heat shrink is really, really thin material. This has actually got some heft to it. You can see I'm squeezing here and it does deform, but the stuff that's thinner just deforms instantly and there's not much protection. This is a 3-to-1 shrink ratio, but just the quality of the heat shrink is actually way more pro level as opposed to the consumer level on the heat shrink side. Now, the container itself, it did come to me a little jumbled up. You can see here that one of the dividers didn't quite get locked in. You know, that's a typical storage container. I am gonna do my shake test because this is something that I find very important, because let's face it, we're going to be using this, then you're going to have it in a bag. You're gonna throw it in your truck, you're gonna throw it in the back seat, you're gonna throw it behind you. It's gonna go all over the place. Are these connectors going to stay in there? Are they going to mix? That's the question. We open it up after all that shaking, and I don't see any connectors that have been mixed. The yellows are correct. The blues, reds, greens, the whites, everything is where it's supposed to be. So overall, it's really not bad. Not quite as good as their other container. This is the heat shrink crimpable butt connectors. And this one, these are hard molded. These you can actually pull them out and move them around. So this one actually does a much better job of holding these in because they don't have the flex within this entire kit. All right, so here we go. We put the red wire up to the red collar on the inside. So now they're actually intertwined because we didn't twist the wire. It's actually intertwined within the inside. After the first use of the heat gun, this now slips right off after it has expanded. Okay, now it's starting to cool down. It's holding on a little bit better. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my pliers and I'm actually gonna squeeze these together a little bit here to give us a little bit more bite. That means I gotta work a little bit more to get it to go on the head, but let's see if that takes care of that portion of it. If you look right here in the middle, you can actually see this is the solder section itself. Everything else is the heat shrink tubing, and what we're looking for is for that to flow. Now I've modified this one slightly. This one is different than the other connector that I did. What I did on this connector was I allowed the sheathing to enter these shackles, but just the bare wire on the inside. On this one, what I have done is I've inserted the sheathing all the way down to the solder joint, so just the solder is gonna flow into this one. I'm curious if it does just as good. This is the technical way you're supposed to do it, but we're gonna put this on our test jig. We're gonna do a few of these, and we're gonna see if this is just as strong as ones that are done like this, because I'm curious if there is a big difference. The other thing that I did is on this one, as I mentioned, I allowed those wires to kind of intertwine, but on this one, I took the wires and I pre-twisted before I slid them in. So these are actually twisted in here. There we go, and I just got through seeing the solder become liquid, and I'm gonna shake it around a little bit. And now I'm gonna move the heat gun down to make sure both ends of the heat shrink tubing are completely sealed. And there we go. You can see just how shiny it is here in the middle from where that solder actually flowed. But if you look, I didn't rotate this one at all. I shook it for the solder, but there was no rotation, and I've got complete and total seal all the way around. So that little curve here, that little foot, which is definitely doing a lot better this time. It does a very good job of taking that heat and moving it all the way around the piece, and that's really important whenever it comes to the heat shrink. You don't want to have one side done and one side not done. I'm gonna make 3 more like this one, and I'm gonna make 3 more like this one, and then I'm gonna test these and see how they do with the different styles of putting these together real quick. On our first test for the twisted and pushed all the way in, we hit 24 pounds or 107.8 newtons, and we had a failure at the solder joint. On our second, we hit 14.3 pounds or 63.6 newtons, and we had a failure at the solder joint. For our third pull, we hit 25.7 pounds, our highest, or 114.6 newtons, and again, this failed with the solder connection itself. For our untwisted pairs that are merged together, our first one hit 14.9 pounds or 66.6 newtons, and we had a failure at the solder joint. On our second pull, we had 13.8 pounds or 61.4 newtons, and again, failure at the solder joint. On our third and final pull for the untwisted, we hit 19.7 pounds or 88 newtons, and again, we have failed at the solder joint. Before we go any further, I want to test how a lighter does with these. So it's a little difficult to tell We've melted the solder a little bit, but I don't know if we've actually gotten it completely done. We can definitely tell that the lighter does not do a good job because we only hit 9.2 pounds or 41.1 newtons. And this is because of a bad heat source. And I'm not gonna waste any more of these connectors because it's not fruitful. Now, one of the things to keep in mind whenever you decide to use these style connectors over a standard solder or over a crimp style connectors, they all have different functionality. If you're trying to do pull, then that will give you different numbers. So one of the things I want to do is I'm actually going to take one of these and I'm going to manually solder it, and then we'll put it on our testing jig and we'll see how something like that actually works. Now, for our manual solder joint, we hit 25.6 pounds or 113.9 newtons. We actually had a failure of the wire sheathing itself. If you're going to use something like this, having a proper heat gun is key to doing the work. So make sure if you're gonna spend the money on these style connectors that you get one of these heat guns like what Haisstronica supplies with this kit. So here we have one of the connections that I twisted the wire, pushed it all the way in, and allowed the solder to flow around it. And if we look, you can definitely see the twist in it. You can see the shine of the copper, but right here you can also see the solder itself. So the solder did flow around the outside, but if you look right in here, we do not have penetration down in between the pieces of copper. And what I mean by that is if we take this one that I very sloppily just did a quick solder on, but if you look in here, you can actually see we have penetration and we have flow through the wire. You can actually see the grains of the wire down through here in the solder itself. So this is going to be a full integration of the solder into the wire. Now, if we compare that to the one that I allowed to fully integrate with one another, where I didn't pre-twist, you can see that there is, once again, there's solder that's flown all around it. But as you twist, if you look down in here, you can tell it didn't actually get down into the wires. I can move these copper wires. I can take my knife and I can spread these apart, the copper strands that are in here, and the other one, I can do that as well. I can stick my knife in there and I can separate it without any problems whatsoever. I can't do that with the one I manually soldered. Having shown all of that, it's very important to understand that that doesn't mean it's a failure of the connection. As you can see, the connector worked great. It actually didn't have a problem. Now, the one that we did have a problem with was the one that I used a lighter on. So if you're going to do something like this, you absolutely need a heat gun in order to properly heat up that solder and allow it to flow as much as it's going to around those copper wires. They're not going to go into it. However, if you think about these solder connectors this way, you're actually performing very similar function as a butt connector. So if you think about it as a standard butt connector, you're simply taking the solder, heating it up, and allowing it to flow around the copper that is in there, and that's going to give you your connections that are on it. This may be the perfect scenario for you. This may be too large of a connector, it may be too cumbersome, you may not be able to get in there, and this may work better. So do they work? Absolutely they work. They're just very specific with where and how they work versus a standard solder joint. Now, one of the things that I definitely need to call out here is if you're using some of these crimp style connectors with these old-fashioned crimpers or even some slightly better ones than these, this heated solder connection is better than the vast majority of the crimpers that you can purchase out there that are standard like this. You need to get something like this Haisstronica one. They sent me this one just to do this test, and I actually really like this thing. I did a review on it, I liked it so much. But these will actually do the good job that you need in order to actually crimp these down. If you're using these, then you're absolutely going to surpass the ability for these to properly crimp these full barrel connectors. So keep that in mind whenever you're doing this. If you're limited with one of these unfortunate ones, like a lot of us have been for years, then you will be absolutely further ahead in the game if you do this with a proper heat gun. So I have 3 more connections made, and what I'm gonna do is submerge them in water for 15 minutes so we can make sure that these are actually watertight. I have absolute faith they're going to be, but we're gonna test that to make sure. Okay, we have no issues with water penetration into the first one. Everything looks good. On our second one, we have no water penetration into it either. And on our final one, we're the same thing. There's no water penetration within it. Nice and solid, no issues at all. So we've shown how these work on water and being soaked in it for 15 minutes. Now I'm curious how these will actually do in freezing conditions. So we're gonna take one and we're gonna leave it completely open and throw it in the freezer. Then we're gonna take another one. We're gonna wrap it in a wet cloth and see how it does. And then on a third one, we're actually gonna completely submerge it into a glass of water and let it freeze overnight. So we're gonna let these go overnight. We're gonna come back tomorrow and we're gonna see how these are doing. Okay, so we have all 3 here out of the freezer. It's actually been well over 24 hours at this point. And we have our one here that is completely outside and it looks really good. It's still flexible even though it's very cold. Then we have this one. This one looks equally as good. I'm not seeing any leakage on the inside. There's no freezing on the inside. So that one looks really good. No issues at all with that. So the whole premise of this one is if you have a car and you're driving down the street and it's slushy out or snowy out and it actually gets a pile of it built up, what will happen? This is what will happen if you actually completely freeze for some reason the connectors. It is completely frozen. I'm gonna try to break this open here. Now we have this one completely broken open. It is still flexible. And if you look on the inside, there is no water in there. There's no ice in there. So it has not penetrated. So either which way, just being in a cold environment, it is still very workable, very pliable, has no issues at all. One that is actually surrounded in loose frost or snow or something like that, it does extremely well, or completely submerged in water that totally freezes, the connector is good as well. So these connectors definitely still hold up even whenever it's really cold out. So if you need to actually use these connectors in the cold, that's not gonna be an issue. If you look here in the background, you can actually see that we're doing this inside of a freezer and it worked great. We had no issues with them whatsoever. They function just like they did here in the room. So in the cold, not an issue either. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're actually going to test these out with a long-term test. We're going to use some of the standard crimp style, and then we're gonna do some of these heated ones with the solder in it. And we're gonna actually have these on a vehicle. We're going to put on some nice fancy LED spotlights so that we can see a little bit better. And we're gonna use these to connect it up to the system. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna come back in about a year and we're gonna let you know if we're having issues with one or the other. That way you can know in a typical situation if one is actually better than the other or if the other is better than that one. So that's what we're gonna do. So we'll actually have a long-term usability test for these so you actually know which one is smarter for you to purchase depending on your application. So who is a kit like this for? Well, it's for DIYers, auto technicians, marine techs, and trailer owners. Basically, anybody who's looking for this style of a connector. These work extremely well. I didn't have any problems with it. Now, Haisstronica did send me these items to test and to show you guys, but I I didn't find any fault with any of them. They did exactly what I expected them to do. The solder heat connectors here worked good. As you could see, none of them failed with a water incursion. There was no problems with the freezer. They did exactly what you would expect them to do. The heat gun, it held up to our tests. It even ran for an extended period of time and we had no problem with it. So I even liked the heat gun. It was very nice. The other thing I really liked about it was the pinpoint action that was on it. Just remember, if you do get this, you may have to squeeze this connector down manually yourself, so it will be tight enough to where it doesn't fall off the tip of the heat gun itself. If you frequently use these style of connectors, please put it in the comments below. I would love to hear from you if this is something that you do actually use. I'm old school and I typically actually solder my stuff, or I use one of the barrel style crimp connectors. That's typically what I do. I don't use these very often. But for those of you who do, what do you use them on? Put it in the comments below because I would love to hear from you and understand the different applications that you guys are using them on. If you've never used something like this and this is intriguing, then be sure to check out the link below. It's the affiliate link, or you can just go to Amazon and check them out for yourself. They sell it as a kit over there as well. So thank you very much for coming on this really cool video that we were able to do. Thank you very much, Haisstronica, for sending me this product to test and to show the viewers out there how it does. If you have any questions about it, please put it in the comments below. Or if you just want to say, hey, great job, we'd love to hear those type of comments too, especially amazing comments like this one. Thank you very much for leaving that comment. And remember, keep your tools sharp and your batteries charged. We'll catch you on the next one.